So the third issue we've come across quite regularly is one of two things: either someone is uncertain or someone is not in the room. And I'll give you an example. Like the easy IoT proposition is in the manufacturing space. I think everyone in this room would probably say manufacturing 4.0 is the next big thing for IoT. And it's very easy to define what you want to do, very easy to explain what the output is. But to take a step back and look at it from the perspective of the MD of a large manufacturing plant that's humming away and going through millions and millions and millions of euros a week maybe. He hears from all of his colleagues and peers and all of the industry press that you should be doing IoT. Manufacturing 4.0 is the next big thing. You let loads of sensors all around your factory floor, you get loads of reports, loads of data, magic will happen and you'll save money. And the challenge from that person's perspective is understanding how that magic piece works. They're going to look at it from the perspective of what's my ROI here, and they're very comfortable, working on what the ROI is of a new manufacturing line, a new product. If I bring a new product online, what's that going to take? If I put a new pick and place machine, what efficiency is that going to bring me? That's a very clear thing that they're very used to. However, IoT can push someone out of their comfort zone, and in that case, sometimes the guy who's actually in charge of the purse strings and the project and driving it all can be uncertain. He's been asked to take a leap of faith. And someone who's not too sure and is actually taking a leap of faith, they can be difficult in driving a project. The other area that we have is the missing stakeholder. And when you're talking very large IoT projects, so for example, smart cities, the issue that you sometimes get in smart cities is who is the stakeholder? And it could be the general public, but the problem is on the project team, you don't have a representative for the general public. So now who's going to drive the requirements? Who's going to drive the project forward? And it becomes a bit of a challenge. Smart cities is also interesting in that you have a split between the stakeholder that has to fund the project, probably the local council, and the stakeholder that's going to get the benefit, which is the operational person actually using the IoT solution. And at the end of the day, if there's a conflict between the two of them, then who's going to win, essentially. So you've got to end up in a situation where your stakeholder is comfortable and committed to the project. That's fundamentally it. If you've got a project where the stakeholder isn't quite driving it, you could end up in a world of problem. Now, the stakeholder's primary responsibility is to drive the project, but they also have to fund the project. So if you ask a stakeholder what's going to make them comfortable, they're going to ask you one question. Any guesses as to what that question is? How much is it going to cost? So essentially, we've been building custom software for well north of a decade at this stage. And when it comes to the how much will it cost question, we're very, very well tuned up to have that conversation. Essentially, it quickly becomes a case of we don't know how much it's going to cost at this stage because we don't know what it is, and actually nor do you. We're going to have to work together to work out exactly what it is, put the scope together in place, and put a project budget, and off we go. It's a very defined process that works really, really well. In the IoT space, though, it's a whole lot more complex. And what we started doing in Action Point is changing the phraseology from a project budgeting process into a journey. And here's why. I'll give you an example. So about a year ago, we had a smart light bulb IoT startup company come to us, and they were probably the best prepared team that came to us for our very first initial client meeting. They came in with the bulb in their hand, they had all the electronics with screen the bulb. They were telling us that this allows you to dim the bulb, change the color of the bulb, have the bulbs talk to each other, report energy usage to the cloud, and so on. It was a pretty fantastic bulb. And then they had great screen-by-screen mock-ups of how their app is going to work, and they're able to talk me through the mock-up. You're going to go in here to set your mood, you're going in here to set your tone, you'll hit here to automate your house lights at night, you'll go here to see your energy usage, and so on. It was a really cool concept. So essentially the question they posited to us was, how much is it going to cost to build an app? And it sounds fairly easy. Well, we ended up like a 1-hour conversation with them that significantly changed the course of their business. So we started kind of enumerating the main areas that are involved in bringing an IoT project into production. And these are the top level items. But within each of those, there's an awful lot of further consideration to take. Now, I'm not going to read through every single part of this, but the notion, two of them jump out in particular that are subtle but surprising the impact that they'll have. The first is just consider the story of you eventually bring this thing to market, it's in B&Q, and the customer buys it. They bring that bulb home, they've got their smartphone's connected to the cloud, the bulb isn't. How do you get the bulb connected to the cloud? It's basic device provisioning, but it's got a huge impact on how you actually manufacture the bulb and what has to go into the bulb. So let's say you take the path that I'm going to get that bulb to connect via the user's local Wi-Fi. So for starters, you're assuming every house has got local Wi-Fi or you can't sell your bulb. So if it's going to connect to local Wi-Fi, it's got to know how to username and password and so on to get into Wi-Fi. There is no screen on the bulb and there's no room for a screen on the bulb. So you now need a Bluetooth connection between the bulb and the phone so the phone can actually talk to it and give it the details so as it can connect to Wi-Fi. So all of a sudden out of that conversation, the bulb now needs a Wi-Fi chip and a BLE chip. But then what if you think of, you know what, if you look at your target market and not everyone's got Wi-Fi, you now might need a Zigbee local gateway. For the energy side of things, you might use the likes of Sigfox to communicate your energy usage back into the cloud. But for remote control where you need immediate response, that might not be the issue. So there was a whole conversation kicked off on that one question alone that had a significant impact from unit costs, electrical design in the bulb and so on. So that was one interesting conversation. And then the other one was, on the back end, if you're sending this into the customer base, into the public customer base, they're going to have questions. They're going to want to call somebody. That person they call is going to have to be able to answer those questions. So you basically have a whole customer service interface into your back-end cloud system. So, Jim last turned on his lights. Have we not seen the lights for the last 2 days? If we haven't, it's probably a broadband connectivity issue. Giving the customer service person the tools to be able to intelligently talk to the end customer about where the possible problems are was a pretty big challenge. So the customer service piece became big. And then even it came into what's your business model? How are you going to sell these? Are you going to actually sell an annual subscription for the bulb access? Well, if you do that, now again, your customer service system is impacted because you've got to handle billing, you've got to handle refunds, and so on. So you can see that these little small threads, when you start pulling them, become very big things. And that's why when you're building an IoT project, you've got to take it a piece at a time. So does anyone in the room know what this equation is?
Drake's equation.
Boom, who said that? Nice, okay, yes, Drake's equation. So, essentially the Drake equation was positive in the 1960s to answer a pretty much impossible question, which is how many alien civilizations might exist in the universe that we've got half a chance of talking to via radio waves? It's a big question. What this guy did was he broke it down. And the value of Drake's equation is not any given answer, because there's a lot of controversy over the answers, but it's given people the thought process and the structure with how to address what is otherwise an almost impossible problem. I won't even go into it, have a Google of it, it's an interesting topic in itself, but it costs you half a day in Wikipedia though, so be careful. So, what Action Point tried to do was, we explored, could we do a Drake equation for IoT budgets? And we gave it a shot, and our Excel sheet got really complex really fast, and it was nowhere near as eloquent as the previous slide. So by the measure of eloquence alone, I'd say that costing an IoT project isn't as simple as finding how many ETs are phoning home. But if you are going to go talk through how much your IoT project is going to cost, there is a process, there's a mechanism to do it. And you start out with the 8-layer stack that probably everyone's familiar with in this room. You cost each individual layer. But the problem is you've got the hidden complexities and the hidden interdependencies. So a simple example there is you need to have software running in your gateway. So let's say you go with really, really simple, cheap software running in your gateway. That might be fine for a low volume deployment. But in a high volume deployment, the unit cost of your gateway may be a lot higher because the software needs more horsepower to run. Also, your connectivity cost of your backhaul might be more expensive because simpler software will be more verbose and use a lot more data. So finding the balance there between how much you invest in your software versus what your unit cost of connectivity is are very important balances to strike. And another one is near the boundary is the analytics. If you know what your analytics requirements from day one, then great. Like if your analytics requirement is very big, you want to know everything about what's going on in your IoT, then you're going to have a lot of sensors out there. They're going to have to be talking to a pretty complex, powerful gateway. There's going to be a lot of data coming back, a huge amount of storage. You're going to have data warehousing challenges as well to make your analytics run in a reasonable time. On the other hand, if you do very simple analytics, all of those things become very simple. So you can see how a question at one layer can have massive impacts across the whole lot. And then, so essentially, when you're looking at this costing IoT project, you have to take it a bite at a time, basically. And MVP is key. You've probably heard MVP, and in the IoT space, doing a minimum viable product is absolutely critical. But you've got to do it right. And the example here is an MVP done wrong and an MVP done right. In the IoT space, an MVP done right is when you go through every single layer. So your first version is touching every single part of the IoT stack. In this MVP, the project goal was something to get around it. And at the very start, they started building it incrementally, but at no point in time was it usable to the end. Whereas when an MVP is done right, you boil it down to its essence. So I want to get around, the simplest way to get around is a skateboard. you get some user feedback, you get a handle, that becomes a bike, and very quickly you've actually got a usable mode of transport. And that's the mindset to begin when you're designing your MVP in the IoT space. So I guess in summary, I hope that some of this gives you an idea of where some of the road bumps might be, and speed bumps might be, and give you some of the tool sets in delivering your IoT project. I just can't overemphasize enough that mindset of building an MVP. And the other piece of advice I'd strongly give you is that no organization will do an IoT solution end-to-end on your own. You're going to have to bring in third parties to do so. When you do that, bring them in as partners, not vendors. And what I mean by that is if you bring in someone and it's on a vendor basis, you're kind of keeping them at arm's length. You've got to bring in someone that's going to work very closely with you, be a part of your team, and enable your success. So I'd like to thank you for your time.
All I'm saying is, who needs the Web Summit? The quality of presentations this morning, I'm very lucky, I get to do a lot of these. The quality of presentations, including yours, John, they're outstanding. And as you know, if you want to come along to the Web Summit, you will be charged quite a lot of money.